If we can. Welcome. I'm Brett Benjamin. I'm a faculty member at SUNY Albany in the English department there. I'm the current chapter president of the United University Professions union chapter there. So I've been doing some labor work with academics for the last few years. But I'm extremely pleased to be here tonight at the forum for an event with Doug Henwood and Liza Featherstone, both of whom I've been fans of for some time. This is the James Connolly Forum. For those of you who haven't been here before, our red and green banner here behind us, James Connolly came to the U.S. in 1902, moved to Troy in 1903, setting up house at 96 Ingalls. It's Ingalls with an I, not with an E. It's unfortunate, but Ingalls with an I Avenue, a few blocks from here. He worked at the Metropolitan Insurance Company until a recession caused his firm to falter. While he was there, he was active in the Socialist Labor Party, where he engaged in a notable dispute with its leader, Daniel De Leon, about fighting for wage increases. Connolly was for this. De Leon apparently was against it. Most of you know, I imagine, that he later returned to Ireland, played a large role in the labor conflicts leading up to the Dublin lockout of 1913, and then ultimately was one of the leaders of the Irish Citizens' Army in the 1916 uprising against British rule, executed by the British after that, and today is recognized as one of the great socialist leaders of the 20th century. When I went to graduate school, I went as an Irish studies scholar, and so Connolly was actually among the first introductions for me into a socialist tradition, and so it's a pleasure to sort of have him behind me, and it has been, one of the folks who have launched me down the road that I've gone myself. So a pleasure to be at the James Connolly Forum. The standard practice for these events is to ask for announcements about events at the beginning of the affair rather than at the end. And I'll give you one, which is about the forum and its upcoming program. On February 26th, 7 o'clock here, Carol Barton will be talking about women in the refugee crisis. So put that on your calendars and hope you can join the forum again for that other timely discussion. Are there other announcements about upcoming events that people want to spread the news about? Alice?
I believe, well, it's tomorrow, I think at 5:30 at SUNY. These young black women, female students, were basically beaten up by a group of whites on a bus, and CAMI and other organizations they're having basically a demonstration. The university finally has spoken, come out, but so far nothing has been done as far as anybody knows about identifying the students and bringing, other than the campus police, bringing Albany police into it. But if you can, really do try and show up. They need that support.
Did you say where?
I think it's at the small fountain on the Uptown Albany campus.
Yes.
That was where the one earlier in the afternoon had been planned, but I knew the time had been shifted, and I didn't know the final organizing
That's
details.
The latest that I've heard. But
Other announcements?
I simply want to take the liberty of circulating this for anyone who is not on the James Connolly mailing list. Unless you live like really far away, it would be really great if you put your name and email down for future events. It really helps us in publicizing these. Even if you're, if you're not interested, you might know other people who are in a particular topic. So I'm going to pass around a clipboard with a pen. Thank you.
There's a forum here tomorrow from 1 to 4, Transition Troy, and we're interested in trying to reduce the carbon use on the environment. There's also some organizing and social justice issues. So tomorrow here, Transition Troy.
Excellent. So let's move on with the main event. We have two speakers here tonight. The format here is going to be that Doug is going to speak for 10, 12, 15 minutes, something like that. Liza is then going to offer a few remarks on her own, and then the two of them are going to have a bit of a conversation about the issues that they've raised, and then we'll open the floor to questions and discussion there. Our two guests today are Doug Henwood. It says you're an American journalist. I trust that that's accurate. I don't want to be...
written by a British publisher.
Journalist in economic analysis, writes frequently about economic affairs. He publishes a newsletter, Left Business Observer, that analyzes economics and politics from a left-wing perspective. My first encounter with Doug was at the Rethinking Marxism conference, where he had been sort of shoehorned into doing a keynote address. I think Mike Davis failed to show up or something like that. Doug got up and, with an hour or two's notice. I don't know, maybe it was a day. I'll give him an hour. Let's make it exciting. 5 minutes notice. Walked up and gave us scathing, lovely, smart presentation. And I remember being with a colleague, Ruth Gilmore, who I respect, and she said, yeah, Left Business Observer, it's pretty much the only publication that I read cover to cover every time. Everything else I pick up, I look at, fine. I read Left Business Observer cover to cover, and that was my introduction to Doug's work. In addition to LBO, he has a radio show, Behind the News, in KPFA, which is podcasted as well, and I've been a regular listener to that for 15 or so years now, and I haven't missed too many of those episodes. They're great, and it's well worth paying attention to. His writing has also appeared in The Nation, where he's a contributing editor, Harper's, Grand Street, Village Voice, Newsday, Los Angeles Times, Guardian, Extra. Apparently you've been quoted in a number of places. It's a very good biography that you've been...
Probably Colin wrote this.
There are 4 books that he's written: State of USA, Atlas, I don't know that one, Wall Street, which is a great book, Out to the New Economy, which is a great book, and most recently, and what we'll hear about today, My Turn, Hillary Clinton Targets the Presidency. So it'll be wonderful to hear from Doug. Liza Featherstone joins us as well, journalist based in New York City, contributing editor to the Nation, where she also writes the advice column Asking for a Friend. It's a new career tryst as well. Tryst? Did I say tryst? I didn't mean that. But her work has appeared in the New York Times, Ms., Rolling Stone, among many outlets. The two books that I have known of her, Students Against Sweatshops, Making of a Movement, and the Selling Women Short, Landmark Battle for Workers' Rights at Walmart, which I think many of you may have been familiar with. She is the editor of False Choices, the Faux Feminism of Hillary Clinton, which is forthcoming from Verso this spring. And so the two books on Hillary form the basis for what I'm sure will be a wonderful conversation tonight. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Brett, and thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I was a bit intimidated noting that the working class used to wear a suit and tie. We don't do that anymore. Perhaps we need to return to those standards. I didn't choose rather to become a professional left anti-Hillaryite. I really didn't. I'm going to blame others for this situation. This strange detour in my career came about when Rick MacArthur, the publisher of Harper's, asked me to write a piece of the magazine about how awful she is. That became the cover story in the November 2014 issue. They gave it the title, Stop Hillary, with an exclamation point, which I was charmed by the fact that so impressed one of the writers at page 6 of the New York Post. He loved that headline, so I figured come up with a headline that impresses someone at the New York Post, you're doing something right. And they wrote it up, the liberals don't like Hillary, and I was annoyed that they called me a liberal, but you don't read your publicity, you weigh it, as they used to say. But then Colin Robinson, the O of OR Books, who had published 2 of my earlier books, asked me to turn that article into a little volume, copies of which are still available. We brought up 10, and there's still 3 left. So available for purchase, and if the copies are all gone, you can find them on the web at orbooks.com. I can order copies there. And it's a little book, although it's jam-packed with facts and seasoned with a few jokes. You could probably read it in an hour or 2. So I'll give you some highlights of it to just fill you with information, but also increase your desire to buy the book. Hillary grew up in suburban Chicago. She was born in 1947. She claimed she was named after Sir Edmund Hillary, who was part of the first team to climb Mount Everest, when in fact he actually did that about 5 years after she was born. Her father ran a small drapery business. The environment that she grew up in, mainly from his influence, was very rigid and austere. It was a very Midwestern Methodist environment, and it still shows. I mean, she's very much a product of a very austere Midwestern Methodist background, and that people think her occasional religious statements, which she only recently said the Bible was very influential on her. She still reads the Bible. People think that may be insincere, but I think unlike a lot of the things she says, that's actually true. And these feelings run rather deep. She does have this deep religious streak, which will come out over and over throughout her career. She fell under the sway, while in high school, she fell under the sway of a reactionary McCarthyite teacher, rabid anti-communist. And she was a Goldwater girl in '64. But then she also fell under the influence of a liberal preacher who took her to Chicago to see Martin Luther King. And so they commenced sort of a liberal turn under the influence of this preacher. And then when she went off to Wellesley College, she then became fairly prominent on the campus. And Wellesley, it's an important point, both she and Bill came out of very modest circumstances, his much more modest than hers. But they were not like the Bushes. They were not born into money and power and privilege. They worked their way up the social ladder through elite schools and institutions like that. And then they eventually turned that into a family business of making money through politics, which they've been very successful at. But that striving, that upwardness, and the constant money, the grasping after money is very much part of the story of both of them. The 60s were just getting going when she got to Wellesley. She was a prominent figure in campus politics, but she was never a radical. She was always kind of a liberal. She was always one for working from the inside. She wrote her senior thesis on Saul Alinsky. She thought he was too radical. She was, though, the consensus choice to give the first student address at a commencement. She improvised one in response to then Massachusetts Senator Edward Brooks' prepared main address. It makes for funny reading now, but the conclusion of it, which is one of the more remarkable documents in her remarkable history. She said, "We are, all of us, exploring a world that none of us even understands and attempting to create within that uncertainty. But there are some things we feel, feelings that are prevailing acquisitive and competitive corporate life, including tragically the universities, is not the way of life for us. We're searching for more immediate, ecstatic, and penetrating modes of living." She's come a long way from that. She took that search for ecstasy to the Yale Law School, which greatly disappointed Saul Alinsky when she told him that. He was very disappointed in her. But she said she wanted to work for change from the inside. So she realized that the Yale Law School was a good way to go about working the inside. I don't know about working for change. She met Bill early in her law school career. They had their first date crossing a picket line. There was university workers were on strike. And Bill wanted to take her to a show at the art gallery, which is closed because of the strike. He talked the guard into letting them in. He moved aside bags of trash, so he's a scab laborer, as well as crossing a picket line, to get into the art gallery. Sort of set the tone. She did intern one summer at a radical law firm in Oakland, something that's now forgotten, and I'm surprised the right hasn't made more of that fact. 2 of the 4 partners were communists, actually. So you know, if you want to go crazy about what a Bolshevik she is, there's some material for you. So late in high school, she met Marion Ray Edelman, who was the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, went to work for her when she was fresh out of law school, and earned the reputation, which she still draws on extensively, of being a great advocate for children. But you know, children are only so lucrative. And so she decided to go work as a staff lawyer on the impeachment committee for Nixon. And when she was on there, she told anybody that she met in Washington that Bill was going to be president someday. And of course, nobody believed her, but she, of course, turned out to be right. After some dithering, when the impeachment committee's work was done, she finally went to Arkansas to join Bill, who was then running for Congress. She did a little legal clinic work at first, but then took up work at the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, which was the attorney, the go-to firm for corporate Arkansas. She represented utilities and banks. She once said, "You can't be a lawyer without representing banks." And then, of course, notoriously, Walmart was one of the clients. She served in the board of Walmart. This friend of women, never complained about their notorious discrimination against women, which Liza knows all about, having written a book on it. This great now friend of unions never complained about the rabidly anti-union posture of Walmart. She never complained when Bill supported right-to-work laws when he was running for governor of Arkansas. She was very deeply involved in crafting his war on Arkansas teachers and their union. They decided they were going to make an enemy out of the Arkansas Teachers Union and imposed competency tests on teachers. Unfortunately, a disproportionate number of those teachers were black women. And the competency tests were perceived as a racist, sexist, and anti-union thing. And it created a lot of bad feeling in Arkansas. This is all now forgotten now. She's the friend of women and African Americans. While she was at Rose, she was representing clients who were doing business with the state when her husband was Attorney General and Governor. That might be seen as a conflict of interest, but her fans reject all accusations of impropriety and all. She worked with Bill as he became a rising star in the national scene, helping to develop the new Democrat agenda. Very business-friendly, tough on crime, aggressive abroad. They are very much partners. When I first started doing this research, I really didn't appreciate how deeply involved they were together. They're very much a joint venture. She was not just a passenger on the Bill Express by any means. Way back in those days, they spoke of something they called the journey with a capital J, apparently. 8 years of Bill, 8 years of Hill. So we've had our 8 years of Bill, maybe we'll have 8 years of Hill, we'll see. Bill toyed with the idea of running for president in 1988, but it was too soon, and there was much worry about the scandals. The scandals were mostly Bill's paramours. As Hillary said, Bill is a hard dog to keep on the porch. But a lot of the scandals were very questionable stuff in her practice of the Rose Law Firm, with conflicts of interest all over the place. So on the advice of some of his counselors, Bill postponed the race in '88. They overcame those worries 4 years later. Long story short, in 1992, he won. She became First Lady. She ran the disastrous healthcare reform project when she was First Lady. She, the horribleness of her running it reflected some very significant characteristics about her. She ran it in secret. She doesn't like openness. She doesn't like publicity. She likes to control everything. She made no effort to win friends in Congress. She thought that what she would deliver would be so self-evidently marvelous that it would just sail through Congress. She alienated many, many powerful senators who are, have pathologically large egos. And from the first, she ruled out a single-payer plan. And I just noticed today that she said in Iowa that single-payer will never, ever happen. Apparently now she and Nancy Pelosi have decided that Democrats are running against single-payer. But when she was running the healthcare scheme, she said no to that. She now makes a preposterous claim that she took on insurance companies and drug companies in this healthcare overhaul scheme, but in fact, that's not true. It was an enormous flop, though, and alienated everyone. So she was somewhat chastened by this disaster and moved on to little things, more classic First Lady stuff. as she wrote in Living History, one of her vast, unreadable memoirs, she's worked on things that were more achievable than massive undertakings such as healthcare reform. On my agenda now are children's health issues, breast cancer prevention, protecting funding for public television, legal services, and the arts. She campaigned for changes in adoption laws and for a bill to guarantee that newborns and their mothers wouldn't be kicked out of the hospital sooner than 48 hours after the birth. It's all very high-minded. Some of this is pretty good stuff, but really, really limited impact. But the Clintons were very big on these little micro-initiatives, and they remain very big on the little micro-initiatives. She did, however, support a very big impact thing, welfare reform. Now, that was partly political expediency. Their pollster, Dick Morris, told him it would be good for Bill's re-election. But it also fit with her old Midwestern Methodist view of the world. She had occasionally referred to welfare recipients as deadbeats who'd been put to productive work by welfare reform. She praised it as late as 2002. While a senator, she voted for a Bush proposal to expand work requirements under TANF, the successor to AFDC, the welfare scheme that Bill killed. She also supported Bill's crime bill in 1994, which greatly lubricated the machinery of mass incarceration. She ran around giving speeches about super predators, these without a conscience teenagers who had to, she said in one speech, had to be brought to heel. And she supported 3 strikes and you're out legislation. She was really very much into the war on crime and the increase in the prison population. As Bill's days in the White House were winding down, she decided to run for the Senate from New York, a state where she'd never lived, had showed no interest in, and where she didn't even have a house. She bought the house, visited every county in the state, and declared herself a lifelong Yankees fan, when of course she never was. She did win election to the Senate, mainly because Rudy Giuliani pulled out because of cancer and a scandal, and her opponent was a real nothing dude. But her Senate career was remarkably undistinguished. She moved almost no legislation except things like renaming post office after local worthies. She made friends with Republicans. She went out of her way to make friends with Republicans, including several of the managers of her husband's impeachment proceedings. She made a beeline for the Armed Services Committee because she loves a man in a uniform. Her most notable act in the Senate was voting for the invasion of Iraq. She didn't just vote for it, though. She deliberately did not read the National Intelligence Estimate, the full classified National Intelligence Estimate that the CIA prepared, which, unlike the public sanitized version, was very, very skeptical about the existence of weapons of mass destruction. Bob Graham, the former senator, read it, and he said it was very damning and voted against the war after having read it. She didn't read it, and that's not like her. She's very careful. She reads everything. She's extremely well informed. Her not reading was deliberate because she didn't want to be troubled by facts when casting her vote for the Iraq War. She touted connections between Saddam and Al-Qaeda, something that even Joe Lieberman wouldn't do. While she prayed with the mostly right-wing members of something called the Fellowship, or the Family, a collection, a secretive group of hawkish pro-corporate politicos in D.C., which numbered among them the atrocious Sam Brownback of Kansas, who just once described her as a beautiful child of the living God. She voted for bankruptcy reform, which made it more difficult for people to file for bankruptcy. She had been briefed several years earlier by Elizabeth Warren on the topic, and shy about releasing just who those donors are, very much more so than most Washington think tanks, which are generally tell you who gives them money. Kath doesn't like to know, doesn't want you to know. So that's also Hillary's secretiveness. She, after so much secretiveness in government, the last thing we need is someone even more dedicated to it. She entered the 2008 presidential race as the presumptive frontrunner, rather like today. But her candidacy fell apart over the next several months. She fought to the end. She stayed in the race until June. At one point, she noted that Bobby Kennedy got killed in June. So the subtext was, Obama, perhaps vulnerable to being shot by a racist nut, so she wants to be there just in case. She and her husband were not above race-baiting Obama during that campaign. And she and her team initially underestimated him, seeing him as little more than a pretty face. I think Bill once called him a talk show host. She noted at one point that she was getting the votes, unlike Obama, was getting the votes of hardworking Americans, white Americans. All this didn't work. She lost. And Obama gave her the consolation prize of making her Secretary of State. At the time, people drew parallels to Lincoln's famed cabinet of rivals, but I think his idea was to keep her on a tight leash so she didn't cause him any trouble. He didn't let her do very much, though. He ran foreign policy pretty much out of the White House. She did travel a lot. One of her great achievements is listed as traveling 1 million miles while Secretary of State. It's not clear what diplomatic accomplishments she had. She wrote some emails, of course, while Secretary of State. But despite being the nation's top diplomat, she was typically the most bellicose member of the Obama cabinet, sometimes outdoing the Republican Secretary of Defense Robert Gates in her love of military action. She consulted frequently with Henry Kissinger, whom she describes as a good friend. And curiously, while she was Secretary of State, Bill's speaking fees shot up dramatically, as did contributions to the Clinton Foundation. Many of these fees and contributions came from companies and governments with business before the State Department. Lots of apparent quid pro quos. There are plenty of details in this in my book, which there are still 2 copies there. But I do have to wonder if the whole reason that she set up that private email server, aside from her low love of secrecy, and why she deleted those 30,000 emails, I wonder if that has something to do with quid pro quos between the State Department and the Foundation. We don't know. The FBI is apparently hot on the case, and we don't know what may come of all that. But it certainly would be delicious if she got indicted in a month or 2. Not to cheer for prosecutors. It's not my style, but in this case, I'll make an exception. 2 especially awful things she did while Secretary of State, aside from promoting fracking abroad very aggressively and also helping to open up the Mexican oil industry to U.S. firms. 2 of the worst things she did were supporting covertly the coup in Honduras and what they did, the reconstruction of Haiti. Many more details in the book. But as my friend,
selling for $25.
as my friend Greg Grandin, who is a historian of Latin America, told me, let's be clear, grassroots Democrats who support Clinton for president would be enormously sympathetic to the coalition that was trying to reverse the Honduras coup, comprised of environmentalists, LGBT activists, people trying to make the morning after pill available, progressive religious folks, anti-mining, anti-biofuel peasants, and legal formers working to humanize Honduras' lethal police prison regime. And Clinton betrayed them, serving up to Honduras' crime-ridden oligarchy. Hundreds of good people have been murdered by the people Clinton sided with in late 2009 and early 2010. And Haiti, that's really, really grotesque story. Bill and Hillary have a long history with the country. They spent part of their honeymoon there in 1975 in a trip paid for by a guy from Citibank. You gotta love them. Their first date involved crossing a picket line, and their honeymoon was paid for by a Citibanker. Hillary took office as Secretary of State, pledging special attention to Haiti because of this special place it had in their hearts. And it turned out to be very special indeed. The 2010 earthquake reconstruction after the 2010 earthquake, was basically run by Hillary at State and Bill through the foundation. And let me emphasize, it was very much a joint venture between the 2 of them. There's a couple of good articles in Politico about this. One of them was titled "The King and Queen of Haiti," because that's what Bill and Hillary were in the post-Reconstruction period. Their achievements, though, really not much to write home about. Instead of building housing and rebuilding the infrastructure, which of course is what Haiti's most desperate need was, they built a low-wage garment factory, throwing farmers off productive land. And it provided only 1/10 the number of jobs they promised. And they also built some horrendous worker housing next door to them. No plumbing, no running water, 1 pump for 20 units for the housing. It was grotesque. The foundation provided toxic trailers, very much ones like the ones that FEMA provided after the Katrina in New Orleans. They did build 2 luxury hotels in Port-au-Prince, and the embassy built state-of-the-art LEED-certified luxury housing for the embassy staff at $1 million a unit. The design of that housing was inspired by the tin-roof shanty towns in the Haitian hillsides. This is literally slumming, what they were doing. It was really criminal in a country whose per capita income is equal to about 12 seconds of Bill and Hillary's normal speaking fee. She left the State Department after the 2012 election, immediately started making hawkish noises, criticized Obama for not arming the Syrian rebels quickly enough. She made threatening noises towards Iran. I don't think the nuclear deal with Iran would have happened had she been president, or maybe even Secretary of State. She entered the 2016 campaign as the inevitable frontrunner, just like 2008. She expected no opposition at all. And I think I read just the other day that she actually, until recently, hadn't really hired any on-the-ground campaign staff after Iowa. She thought she was just going to waltz to the nomination, and then suddenly this cranky dude from Vermont came along. But she's really a terrible candidate. She's not very appealing. Obama got that great cut in one of those debates where he said, "You're likable enough, Hillary." I think he's very good at those. It'd be great to see a whole collection of those. She has no compelling agenda. As a Sanders challenge mounted, she first tried co-opting him, acting like the reincarnation of Eleanor Roosevelt, but now she's moved on to red-baiting him with lies about single payer. She talks constantly of her advocacy for women and children. That's been mostly rhetorical, and overlooks her history with welfare reform, the war on crime, and her love of the Pentagon. I have a professional responsibility to read a lot of the Hillary literature, and I've yet to read a single persuasive case for her candidacy. I'm really trying hard to find one. They're mostly very poorly argued or very emotional, or she's a woman, that's all, you know. And some normally sharp writers who make writing things that make no sense, while the hacks descend into really ludicrous levels of hackery. It's quite a performance. When I first started this research in the summer of 2014, I told some of my Democrat friends that they were making a mistake putting all their eggs in the Hillary basket. She's a terrible candidate. They had no compelling story for her candidacy. There's scandals, old and new, that could blow up at any time. They wouldn't listen to me. They got very annoyed about it, in fact. But now that she's stumbling, I feel quite vindicated. So let me close with what they use as the epigraph of the book, which is still on sale over there. This is from Brad DeLong, an economist who served in Bill's Treasury Department. He now repudiates this, but I really don't understand how you can repudiate something so strongly worded as what I'm about to read. He said, Hillary Rodham Clinton needs to be kept far away from the White House for the rest of her life. Heading up health care reform was the only major administrative job that she's ever tried to do, and she was a complete flop at it. This is before she was Secretary of State. So she has had administrative work since then. She had neither the grasp of policy substance, the managerial skills, nor the political smarts to do the job that she was given. And she wasn't smart enough to realize she was in over her head and had to get out of the healthcare sorrow quickly. I don't think it's a matter of smarts, actually. She's plenty smart, but she's very arrogant and thinks that she knows best. I think that's her problem. But Brad DeLong's statement concludes, there is no reason to think that she would be anything but an abysmal president. Indeed.
Wow.
So lately, Hillary Clinton has been saying on the campaign trail, I'm running so that someday a father can say to his daughter, you can be anything you want to be. So that prompted me to wonder, what might it take for a little girl in America to be what she might want to be? Probably a lot more socialist feminism than we have right now. And Hillary Clinton has really dedicated her career to expressing contempt for all aspects, turning any aspect of that project into policy. If that little girl lived in a place with single-payer health care, for example, her later opportunities in work, love, and life would be much greater. And Doug has discussed Hillary Clinton's relationship to single-payer health care, which she not only played a role in really narrowing the discourse around health care reform when she was First Lady and health care czar, but she may be the first candidate, a presidential candidate in a long time to make opposition to single-payer health care a cornerstone of her campaign, as it has become. Now, not everyone has been running against a socialist candidate. That is a kind of an unusual historical situation that Hillary Clinton finds herself in. but her passion for opposing this very simple benefit that so many other rich countries enjoy is impressive. And this is really a feminist issue. As the Our Bodies Ourselves collective pointed out in 2009, single payer is the only system in which healthcare is independent of employment or marriage, which are critical considerations for women. Women would benefit more than anyone from single payer healthcare. Our healthcare costs are higher than those of men, and women make up 2/3 of the low-wage workforce. And yet, this feminist standard bearer is deeply opposed to that system. Getting back to that little girl, if she wanted any kind of shot at success in this country, in the kind of system that we have, she would need to go to college. Hillary Clinton has also been rather stridently opposing free college tuition, unlike her opponent, though the United States is the only country where students, 57% of them women, are saddled with decades of debt as the price of attaining higher education. And defending this position against free higher ed, Clinton recently said in a debate with Sanders that it was important for people seeking a college degree to have skin in this game. Which I thought was actually a friend of mine who has worked as a sex worker said, yeah, I thought that was pretty funny because that's how most people I know are paying for college. Skin in the game. Yeah. After college, if that little girl then falls on hard times, thanks to Hillary and Bill, she has no safety net, as Doug talked a little bit about welfare reform. Also, really a feminist issue. It's hard to think of a greater blow to the material well-being of poor women in America than Bill Clinton's move in 1996 to end welfare as we know it, which Hillary later defended by demonizing mothers struggling to get by on welfare as deadbeats who were, quote, deadbeats who were, quote, sitting around the house doing nothing. Rush Limbaugh could not have said it better. And what if that little girl gets a job? Doug already mentioned her history with Walmart, the target of the largest sex discrimination suit in history. And he also mentioned her history with busting teachers' unions in Arkansas, a concerted attack on a largely female and many of them African American female workforce. So, given this history, we shouldn't be surprised that while a growing movement is demanding a $15 minimum wage, Clinton has made it clear in this campaign, even in this primary campaign, trying to appeal to liberal voters, she's made it clear that 12 would be just fine with her. And this history, too, makes sense. Doug talked a little bit about her history in Haiti. One of the things she did as Secretary of State was preventing Haiti from raising the minimum wage of its mostly female garment workers to an opulent $5.
A day.
Right, a day. Right, I keep forgetting that. A day. So, anyway, we're going to talk a little bit, but I just want to say to learn more about the feminist critique of Hillary Clinton. You should pre-order my collection, which you can pre-order it on Amazon, and it's called False Choices: The Faux Feminism of Hillary Clinton. It includes chapters from Laura Flanders, Zilla Eisenstein, Medea Benjamin, Tressie McMillan Cottom, Frances Fox Pittman, and a lot of other notables. I say notables, but many of these are women who are not as well known as they should be. And it is not an established feminism book. Most established feminists have been supporting Hillary Clinton, which is part of what we are trying to change. So.
We're going to just talk back and forth for a little bit and then open it up to the audience. I didn't really touch this in my book very much, but do you think Bill's peccadillos are a proper topic for feminist consideration?
So I've actually only recently started thinking about this because when I was working on the collection, I think most of the contributors assumed no. You know, that's really their business, and you know, it was the impeachment was outrageous, whatever you think of the Clintons' politics. But I am increasingly disturbed by the establishment feminist reaction to more information that comes out about allegations of harassment and rape by Bill Clinton of much less powerful women, and allegations that Hillary Clinton played a role in silencing those allegations, in covering them up, in besmirching the accusers' reputations. And that really does seem like a proper feminist issue and a proper issue for the consideration of voters, because that's serious. So I would say no on the sex. They're grown-ups and can handle their marriage however they want. But definitely yes on the more criminal aspect of it, especially. So she had also said recently. She had made a very strong statement about how rape victims should always be believed, which I mean I'm not even quite sure if that's always true. I mean, you know, like any crime, there might sometimes be a false allegation, but she did say that, and then so these accusations that she played a role in silencing these accusers do seem even more disturbing in light of a statement like that.
Rebecca Traister, a journalist who wrote a book for the 2008 campaign about her feelings around the Obama versus Hillary fight. Much more about her feelings than her the politics of the two.
Election means to me.
Yes. Doesn't like my book, and she says one of the things my major failing is I do not understand the election of a woman president is a feminist goal in itself. What do you and your contributors think of that?
We have been unimpressed by that as a goal in itself, mostly because I think that, I mean, for one thing, I think you could ask a lot of poor women in England how they felt about losing their council housing under Margaret Thatcher and whether that had been a feminist goal in itself. I think that in some ways the question just is easily answered by analogies. But also, I mean, I think that that sort of feminism is tired. I think it's really that sort of feminist that is all about that, like, enjoying the triumphs of the elite from afar, and not uplifting the vast majority of women, or even really taking seriously any improvements in their lives. I think that's tired, and I think that it's one of the reasons that a lot of women don't identify as strongly with feminism as they might. You know, I think that this is that this sense that it's for powerful people, and one of the things that, I think, that during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, there was a panel of elite feminists did a little discussion in Vanity Fair about the Monica Lewinsky affair. And they were all just trashing this young woman and saying the most misogynist things about her. And, Nancy Friday said maybe she should rent out her mouth. And, it was such a sort of a window on wow, these are the cabal around Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is who she is really representing. Is that like these elite people who just care about other elite people and don't care about anyone who has no power. So it's like like who cares about the intern? We're just going to get her behind Hillary, and I think that I think it's really run its course.
I like this. I always cite this example, which I got from Gary Will's book, Nixon Agonistes. His explanation of why the 60s happened was that in the 50s, all these liberals and intellectuals and Democrats said, oh, Eisenhower is so terrible. If we could just get a Democrat, everything would be so much better. And Kennedy came in, and things really didn't get much better. And so people then concluded, it's the system that's the problem. And so they launched a great rebellion against the system. And I felt something like that might have happened with Bill Clinton and the anti-globalization movement, and with Obama and Occupy. But also, I wonder if having the first black president has something to do with the explosion of Black Lives Matter. They found out racist police violence didn't change even if there was a black guy in the White House. So maybe if Hillary were elected, we'd see an explosion of radical feminism somewhere down the line. That's the only upside. So
that would be great.
Why don't you ask me a question or two, and then we can pass it on to the audience.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the differences between, our two projects are very much in sympathy, obviously, and I should say that I initially said no to this book project, and Doug convinced me to say yes to it, and I'm glad. Our collection, the False Choices collection, is really purely ideology and policy critique, right? I mean, it is a left-wing feminist take on Hillary Clinton, and Doug's book is certainly there's ideology critique, and it is certainly a left-wing book, but it contains a lot of material that non-left readers would be interested in, about her character, scandals, so forth, and it would certainly be of interest to a right-wing audience as well as to a left-wing. Nobody's going to read my collection, which includes, contributions by prison abolitionists and people like that. Nobody's going to be like, oh, I should vote for Ted Cruz now. So, whereas, someone could read your book and conclude, this is just a terrible person. I should just vote for absolutely anybody else. My question to you is, how do you, does that give you pause? Do you feel qualms? Your book is sort of in the tradition of Christopher Hitchens' No One Left to Lie To about the Clintons, which also enjoyed some bipartisan popularity. Does that trouble you?
Well, funnily enough, that Hitchens book sold mostly in cities where Verso never sells books, and the Harper's issue with my story on the cover didn't sell at all in California. So have to hope the right will step up and buy some copies. No, I had no qualms about it. She's a terrible person. She represents terrible politics, and she is just nothing but bad. Now, I'll listen to somebody who says, lesser evil, important to keep Trump or Cruz out of the White House. I'm not sure I'd be persuaded, but, I'll listen to you. I won't tell you you're ridiculous. But she's just awful, and I think people should know that. And, I would think that in some perverse sense, I'd be doing Democrats a favor. It's probably too late now. But to realize just how vulnerable and awful she is. And they didn't want to hear any part of it. I used to be on this secret email list for elite liberal pundits, and it was not a good fit, let me tell you. But I was on it for several years before I stormed off in disgust. And before I got on it, I thought, maybe it should be nicer to liberals. They're not so bad after all. And no, they're terrible. And they hated the idea that I was going to write this piece for Harper's. They wouldn't. I asked them, okay, make your case for Hillary to me. Tell me why she'd be so great. They wouldn't do that. Like, one of them, I'm not supposed to mention their names, so because I swore secrecy. But one of them said, well, go to the library, do the work yourself. I said, no, I want to know why you think Hillary is so great. And no one would answer me. And like I said in my talk, I read these pro-Hillary screeds, like the preposterous thing that Joan Walsh wrote for The Nation the other day. And I think, where is the argument here? Where is a policy argument for her? Where is a character argument for her? There is none. I've been looking for one. I was looking just to toughen up my own critique. I'd like to read a good one. And I haven't found one yet. So I thought, maybe I'll do these people a favor and they can rethink this candidate. And I still think it's more likely than not she'll be our next president. I think Sanders is giving her a good run for the money, and there are really long-term possibilities in his candidacy, ideological opening, organizational openings. I hope it continues beyond this campaign and doesn't get lost in a get out the vote for Hillary debasement. Like I said, I for a while I was being nice to liberals and thought we should get along, but then when I had this extended exposure to some real name brand people, if I listed their names, you'd probably recognize many of them, how empty they are. They have no ideas, no politics, no passion. All they are is that we're the not Republicans. And I think that the vacancy and corruption of their worldview and their whole political machinery, and the corruption of the Clinton machinery. The Clinton Foundation is one giant influence peddling and shakedown operation. It's made them both very rich. It's been great PR for corporations and foreign governments, but it's done very, very little good for human beings. And this really needs to be exposed and criticized mercilessly. So, I think my inner Trotskyist is coming to the fore at the moment. That, the Dems are really bad. They're part of the problem. And when you make these lesser evil arguments, the lesser evil people never examine their contribution to the rightward drift of American politics. So they say all the compromises are to the right, and they don't get punished for it. So, the liberals, the left, Labor will vote for the Democrats no matter how conservative they get. So the Democrats say, what the hell? I don't need to placate them. And now Hillary can run against single payer with fairly confident that if she gets the nomination, a lot of single payer advocates are going to vote for her. I think this has got to stop somewhere. And I've been reading a bunch now. I'm working on a longer term project about the rot of the American ruling class. And I've been reading some on the the right wings take over the Republican Party. And they've been at it for a long, long time. They started really in the 50s. And many of them were ex-communists who used Bolshevik models of organization, literally. Even the way they sat in a meeting, they used things that they learned in the Communist Party. But they had a vision, a strategy, and they passionately fought for it. They were willing to lose elections to make long-term gains. Everybody laughed in '64 when Goldwater got crushed. But, Ronald Reagan won 16 years later. Bill Buckley ran for mayor of New York in '65 against John Lindsay because he wanted to destroy liberal republicanism. And it worked, They've had a very successful run of it. It now looks to be crashing with Trump and all, but so you got to take a loss now and then if you want to make a long-term gain. So if I think Hillary Clinton is a walking horror, that both personally and structurally. I mean, she embodies a rot of American society. She and her husband, too. I mean, they're very much a pair. They have complementary skills. They're very much a joint venture. And they're just symbolize so much of what's rotten about the liberal side of American society. You know, we can watch a Republican debate and he run screaming in horror. But, the liberals maybe, or the Democrats if they're not liberals, can talk in a more civilized fashion in complete sentences, with some facts at their disposal. But they're appalling people who represent appalling things. And so if whatever I wrote is going to be used by Republicans, and believe me, I actually studied some Republican talking points as I was writing the book. I didn't disclose that in the text, lest David Brock find out. But they're onto it. They're onto the Haiti stuff. They're onto the email stuff. They're onto the foundation stuff. And they're going to use it very, very heavily in the campaign. So, I'm providing an advance warning to the Democrats if Hillary is their nominee.
So I think we should take some questions, right?
So what do you think that Bernie Sanders is not doing that he should be doing? The campaign.
I think what is Bernie Sanders not doing that he should be doing in his campaign? I really have very little advice to offer him. I think that a guy, I have a lot of reservations about him. His foreign policy especially stinks. But, by the standards of American politics, he's just like nothing we've seen in a long, long time. It's a marvelous opening we can do a lot with, I hope, if we work with it. And, what is it, a plurality of Iowa Democrats now self-identify as socialists? I mean, this is a remarkable turn of events. And Sanders has been doing this for 20 years. He won his, somebody told me today that he won his first election by 10 votes as mayor of Burlington. He is now a credible candidate for president. This guy has some serious political skills. So I think he knows what he's doing when it comes to running a campaign. And I certainly didn't expect he was going to turn out this strong. Nobody expected he did apparently, but nobody else did. So I think he's doing a pretty bang-up job. So it's been amazing to watch.
I do think that, I think that this is really changing in the Sanders campaign, but I do think that they probably should have begun reaching out to black communities in a much deeper way a lot earlier. I do think that it sounds like they're really doing that, especially in South Carolina now, but I think that it could have really helped to do it, to make those connections a lot earlier and make those arguments and those human face-to-face connections. I also I do think that they could be more aggressively making the argument of why social democracy is better for women. Because the Hillary campaign, all they've got is she's a woman. And they keep hammering that, and it does seem like a little bit of a missed opportunity not to more stridently make the feminist case for Sanders when it's a pretty easy one to make, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have one question. You didn't mention throughout all your presentation, maybe it is in your book, Benghazi.
Yes.
And I wonder if you'd like to talk a little.
The only time that word appears is in a footnote that's a citation of an article.
What was the question?
Why didn't I mention Benghazi? And if I did I mention it in the book? No, I did not mention Benghazi. The only time the word appears is in a footnote that's the title of an article in which Benghazi appears. I really didn't want to touch that one. I have no idea what went on, and I'm just going to leave the right its crazy obsessions. I do talk about Whitewater, though, I think there's more there than, it's certainly not what the Republicans made of it, but there's something there. And the really interesting thing about Whitewater is the way the billing records for her work on the affair with the Rose Law Firm disappeared while they were under 5 federal subpoenas. They disappeared only to reappear like 2 years later in a private room in the residential portion of the White House. Golly gee, she didn't know where they went. One of the members of this elite secret liberal email list, who is a prominent legal affairs reporter, said to me, "It's easy, Doug. They were lost and they were found." Okay, there you go. So you know but that's so deeply Hillary. You know, these records don't exist. Oh my gosh, look where they're back again.
I have a thing to say about Benghazi. In our collection, False Choices, Medea Benjamin has a really good chapter on Hillary's foreign policy, and she says, you know, Benghazi, I mean, it was a ridiculous right-wing obsession, but there should have instead been a lot of attention to Hillary's role in the decision to invade Libya. And that's a lot more people died because of that than because of Benghazi. So that would really be the thing that we should be paying more attention to.
There's that grotesque clip of her saying, "We came, we saw, he died," after Gaddafi died. That's she's revolting.
This guy had his phone for a while.
I think the combined themes of Benghazi and Libya really have to be emphasized, because this was the woman who ran for president, and I'm going to be awake at 3 in the morning when the crisis happens. And at 3 in the morning, the shootout in Benghazi had been going on for 5 hours. Where was the Secretary of State? Where was the Secretary of State rescuing Christopher Stevens? And he could have been rescued because we have an air base in Sicily, 45 minutes away. So this was a wonderful person who was sacrificed. And the other thing that was sacrificed was Libya. This bellicose woman,
Right.
we got to overthrow Gaddafi for some reason. And now what do we have? We have migrants coming out of Libya, and this is the new front for ISIS.
Right.
She is an absurdity.
She did.
Recently, Paul Krugman weighed in on this, and while I don't worship him, he strikes me as a relatively intelligent person, and a relatively, not as compromised as most liberals. How do you deal with the contents of that when it's somebody that you have to sort of respect, even when he's dead wrong?
I'll start. Well, Paul Krugman has been a Hillary fan for a long time. He was a big fan in '08. He's been against single payer for a long time. He is now studying income inequality at the City University of New York, a completely broke institution, for a salary of $225,000 a year. He teaches one graduate course, I think, for that $225,000. So, my respect for Paul Krugman is not boundless, let me put it that way. But he's been one example of a genre we've seen coming out over the last couple of weeks, of liberals who are basically saying not much can ever change. Don't like the America the way it is, not much we can do about it. They can maybe tweak it around the edges, but not much, because Republicans are so bad. Now, Republicans, they are very, very bad. There's no question about that. But, it's like 20 or 25% of the electorate that really respond to that kind of politics. We're seeing, a tremendous upsurge of popular support for a guy who wants to challenge the way things are, does not accept the status quo as permanent and unalterable. And I don't understand the theory of, and I came across this in that secret liberal email list all the time too, this idea we can't really change anything so we can just, little reforms here and there, the long, hard slog of compromise, blah, 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 blah. That's not the way you do politics. You don't like start by being compromised, and then when you're going to get half of what you ask for anyway, you start by asking for 10 times what you want, in the hope you'll get only 5 times what you want. So this theory of politics, I do not understand that at all. And like I said, the right was willing to lose in order to make a long-term gain. This liberal sensibility is not at all willing to lose. They talk of the catastrophic consequences of losing so much they're paralyzed with fear, and that's just a recipe for more of the same.
I thought that the Paul Krugman argument that you're referring to, I think you mean the one where he was basically saying that because it would be impossible for Sanders to enact his agenda, that everyone should just vote for Hillary Clinton. And I found that this was a very I've seen versions of that argument, and he's probably technically the smartest person making it, but it doesn't make it a better argument. I mean, it's sort of...
Chomsky said it too.
Right. Yeah, so a lot of smart people have been making this argument, but it's not a very smart argument, because what it is it's an entirely elitist view of politics. It's because what will happen at the top, because the person at the top can't make all the difference, we should just keep doing exactly what we've always been doing. But the idea behind a primary campaign like Sanders is that lots of people are organizing. I mean, people are knocking on doors and talking about the ideas in the campaign, and they're talking to each other, and they're talking to their neighbors, and they are trying to build something and build support for these ideas and change the political landscape in which a president would ultimately operate. And Sanders himself has said, I couldn't do any of these things without a movement to put pressure and change the political climate and make these things happen. So I think that one of the reasons that liberals like Paul Krugman are sometimes seem so cynical is because they're very elitist and they don't think about the mass politics that it actually takes to make change happen.
There's a question here, and then in the green, and then I'll get you two next.
I think there was a woman back there who had her hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, I guess this question for Liza, but not the dumb. Can't weigh in. I don't know, just so incredibly depressed about 2 weeks ago, because I get all these, emails from Narrow and Planned Parenthood and stuff, and it's sort of like, that the Planned Parenthood's already, endorsed Hillary Clinton, and it was like, what's, why? It was sort of this long string thing. Is there anything? Obviously, I can write a letter and say I give you money or whatever, and I'm trying to defend everything that you folks do or something. But it was just such a. It seemed corrupt. It just really seemed depressing, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it made me really sad too that they did that, especially Planned Parenthood, which is such a great organization providing such critical services to so many women, and it seemed particularly, this is a contested primary, and she is running against someone whose policies, broadly speaking, would be so much better for women and the very women that they're serving. So it seemed it seemed very distressing. I agree, and the reason and then Sanders undiplomatically said it was because they were the part of the establishment, and everybody laughed at him. But it's true. I mean, that they. I mean, and that is the reason. I mean, the reason is that these kinds of organizations, try to. There's a lot of politics around endorsing earlier, and they believe they will get more from the candidate if that candidate is eventually elected if they were behind them earlier, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess all the organizations are gonna endorse her if she's running against Ted Cruz, but they can be like, but we were with you when there was actually a really good alternative, so it's sort of endorsement brokering, I guess, but and so it's in a very short term, very narrow-minded way, it's rational for them, but I agree it's very depressing, and is very short-sighted, given that to encourage movements and politics that are actually thinking about the broad welfare of women would make a lot more sense in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, Hillary gets a pass on this reproductive rights stuff, and she talks a great game now. But 10 years ago in Albany, at a rally in Albany, she described abortion as a tragic choice for many women, and she talked up abstinence. Since is this for this woman who's supposed to be like the great representative or the fighter for reproductive freedom? She's got a more mixed record than she'd like us to believe at this point. But when Bernie said these institutions are part of the establishment, the whole nonprofit sector is such a terrible thing that deserves very, very severe criticism. They really define the limits of the possible in liberal politics. They don't organize. One of the reasons the reproductive rights movement is in such trouble is that they don't really organize the way the right does. The right, they have churches where people, sign sheets and organize and lobby and make phone calls and write emails. The reproductive rights movement doesn't do anything of the sort. They didn't even put sign-up cards in abortion clinics, for God's sake. So that this whole nonprofit system, and I have a critique in the book of what the Clinton Foundation did with AIDS in Africa, compared to what, believe it or not, the Bush administration did for AIDS in Africa. The Bush administration spent billions of dollars of public money on a very large-scale relief program that got drugs and saved many, many, many thousands of lives. The Clinton Foundation did a little thing here and there and here and there. But, this foundation thing, the neoliberals have, so shrunk the state and so attacked the legitimacy of state programs and replaced it with the private activity of foundations. It's a deeply conservative thing, and it's a very bad thing. And so when Bernie said they're part of the establishment, he was making a more important point than he might have even realized at the time. And it really annoyed them, but it's very, very true. But, the endorsement game, too, like the unions, why are they endorsing so soon? I was talking to a guy who's fairly high up in SEIU a month or two ago. I said, why did you guys endorse her so early? Don't you withhold an endorsement to try to get something in return? Isn't that a good negotiating strategy? And he said, no, I think we did it too late. Too late for what? How does that harm SEIU? They're making a big deal out of supporting a $15 an hour minimum wage. They endorse a candidate who wants 12. 12 is almost 15, I guess.
Instead of the one who actually called for 15.
And Sanders on reproductive rights, Sanders' record is absolutely blemish-free. He never gave a speech in which he described abortion as a tragic choice. It's just the liberals, man, and the liberal foundations, the nonprofit sector, really, after the revolution, they need to do something constructive.
Can I also just say one thing? A chapter in the book by a wonderful writer named Maureen Zakasik argues that especially concerning electoral politics, but even more broadly, that mainstream feminism has become completely about abortion to the detriment of even protecting abortion rights successfully. And so we're told you have to vote for Hillary Clinton because abortion, but this strategy hasn't even worked. Like, we've only seen access to abortion decline. So this sort of single issue focus at the expense of any broader politics is not only neglects a lot of other important aspects of women's lives, but hasn't even been successful at protecting the right to abortion itself. So somebody had a question over there. Yes. Oh, you've had your hand up a long time.
Regina asked a lot of my question, but it was more with these endorsements. Wherever members are polled, the members overwhelmingly come out for Sanders. So my question was, how is it that the leaders can just look away from their members and get away with it? Are their arms twisted? Are they getting paid off? What's the thing behind it? She touched on it a little bit with, well, yeah, we have fundraising for Planned Parenthood. They just annoy people who pay their salaries with donations. But the Working Families Party did a poll of members and people with ideological thoughts, and 87%, I think it was, came out for Sanders. And the same thing should be with its close cousin SEIU, and if you went to numbers, I think you got the same thing.
Yeah. Beyond that, people close to the leadership in these unions say that they actually think that in many cases the presidents of these unions will probably privately vote for Bernie Sanders. So the entire endorsement thing is as cynical as possible. I mean, it doesn't even represent the beliefs of the people at the top. It represents the some idea of what they're going to get out of these endorsements. Yeah, I mean, I think the gap between what the members think and the decisions that are made at the top is a real. It's a sad commentary on the lack of democracy in these organizations. But I think it's also again that divide between elites and any sense of mass politics, like a sort of a disconnect from the idea that the members actually could be the ones to make something happen. Rather than the politicians, like the members could be the ones changing the consensus and starting a movement. And it's a lack of faith, I think.
Yeah, sometimes I think you can never be too cynical about these things. Randy Weingarten, president of the Teachers Union, I think she wants to be Secretary of Education. And she thinks Hillary's likely to be president, and that's the only way she can be Secretary of Education. Now, there's no way on earth that Hillary would ever appoint a union president to the cabinet. It's just not going to happen. So it makes me wonder what Weingarten's understanding of politics is. But, that's what she thinks. Bill Fletcher told me once that a very senior AFL-CIO guy told him that it's much better to be inside the room and not listened to than it is to be outside the room. And I think that's what they also think, that, she's going to be president, I can be at the meetings, and I can be part of the action. And, most liberal elites are afraid of the base. They're afraid of the masses because they have, bad taste in clothes and they were rude and God knows what else. And they have unpolished views about certain matters. But also, if you're a union president and you lose your job and you go back to work as a teacher or working at a shop, that's who wants to do that. You want to stay on top. So they end up thinking like the boss. They're very much part of the senior or junior partners of the ruling class. Let me put it that way, and they want to stay in that status.
Lana had a hand, and I got all you guys, so we'll move through the room. Lana.
Okay, well, what you were just describing sounds to me like what I think of as the complicity system, in which everybody has some kind of place, but in order for the system to just keep going for everyone's survival, everyone continues to kind of play their role. But what I'm wanting to get focused on specifically is the way in which this presidential campaign on both sides, Republican and Democrat, seems to be operating on the assumption that the system, that the political system itself is supposed to generate some kind of solution through its representation, et cetera, of whatever sort of constituency. Whereas it seems to me that in the complicity system, what you've really got is the majority disaffected versus the oligarchy. And the oligarchy doesn't necessarily care whether it's called Democratic or Republican. The question is who's going to serve the interests of the oligarchy. And what we know about the oligarchy is that there has been this heavy, heavy influence by the Koch brothers. So I'm just wondering what you would think would most satisfy or appeal to the Koch brothers as a president. Would it be any of the Republicans, or would it be Hillary Clinton? I'm assuming it wouldn't necessarily be Bernie Sanders, but I don't know. The Koch brothers and their ilk have got, that's where the power lies. This is a very complicated question, but I'm just thinking that.
Yeah, well, well, first of all, what you said about the oligarchy, 100% true. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think there are some splits within the oligarchy itself. There is a kind of a right-wing branch of the oligarchy, right, the Koch brothers. I did a piece for the current issue of the Socialist Register on the relation of the right to the ruling class. And so I looked closely at the funding of like these right-wing think tanks and things like that. And it's not big capital. It's not Goldman Sachs. It's, well, the old classic root of the right was in guys who own small machine tool factories in Illinois, like provincial petty bourgeoisie, basically. We're seeing a higher end version of that with a lot of hedge fund and private equity guys who are mostly on their own or in small partnerships, who are also very libertarian. All they care about is low taxes and no regulations. So they're part of the funding mechanisms of the right and the Republican right. But you don't see names like JP Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs or any of the Fortune 500 companies really contributing to like Cato Institute or Heritage or things like that. It's really mostly these kind of combination of old style petty bourgeoisie plus these lone wolf financier guys who are really the root of it now. So they don't really like Hillary. Hillary's, let's see, if you look at the contribution register for the Center for American Progress, for example, it's all the name brands. And maybe, in high tech and media, you're going to see more of that. Apple, for example, Google, people for whom a certain degree of social liberalism is important. And they're not as rabidly anti-tax as the right-wing guys are. Well, Google manages to avoid taxes anyway with this complex setup they have with Ireland, but they're not as single-mindedly in pursuit of that libertarian paradise. So a Hillary Clinton presidency would do much more in their interest, I think, than a Ted Cruz presidency would be. So there are these splits in the ruling class, but you have this kind of the responsible side of the ruling class that is now the Clinton Democrat, and the wacko side that is right-wing Republican. Obviously what's left out is about 95% of the population, and they just give them no thought. Watching this election is so fascinating. Martin Wolf, a columnist for Financial Times, had a piece the other day in which they gave it the headline, "The losers are in revolt against the elites." And what he said in the column that justified that was the people who are losing in the current setup are in revolt against the elites. He wasn't being quite so rude about the losers. But he's just looking at the U.S. election, and he's thinking, you had this right-wing elite that has been pushing the culture war, which they don't really necessarily believe in, but it's a way to fire up the Yahoo base. You have the liberal elites who push multiculturalism and such, but are very pro-business and pro-deregulation and pure neoliberalism. So you have like the left and he didn't put it this way, but you have the left and right wings of neoliberalism, and people who are not winning in this arrangement, which is like 95% of the population, are really angry. And it really does seem now that the ruling classes do seem to be losing control of the process, at least for the moment. Like they're horrified by Trump. Even the movement conservatives are hard by Trump because he's not a real movement conservative. He's completely unpredictable, loose cannon, huckster. God knows what he would really do if he were president. I can't believe he would actually want to be president because it's too boring. But he's not a member of that club, at least at the present way he's performing now. And the Hillary's stumbles in this campaign and the rise of Sanders is certainly not what Democratic elites expected. So it's just amazing to watch them lose control of this process in a way we haven't seen, at least since the 70s. But it's a fascinating loss of elite control, and that's a great opportunity for us.
We got in the blue jacket, we got Alice. I have you. We'll work on you guys and Gabriel.
Just two brief points. One I'd just like to say is, in terms of Krugman and stuff, I'm sure all the people in this room can kind of relate to this, is, there's a need to remain relevant to important people that exist very heavily out there. And there's certain things you don't do, okay, that if you do, suddenly those people all find themselves uncomfortable with you. Yeah. That you said or done something. It's okay to be critical within certain ranges, but if you go beyond this range, then people are uncomfortable with you. It's called classism. They decide they don't want to invite you to dinner anymore. They don't want to find themselves in an awkward situation with you making some remark about these things. And I think when it comes to Krugman, he's a person who's flirted, he's gone fairly far, with his criticism of a lot of traditional power. But to take the step further and to support someone like Sanders, you have gone beyond acceptable behavior. Definitely. And for people like many of these people, you just don't do it. Yeah. The second thing is, I'm always, this is kind of a dangerous place to go, but I'm always, this issue about feminism here. I mean, what is feminism? Because it seems to me that you have these arguments, and these arguments about who is really, a feminist. I mean, is Hillary Clinton a feminist? And some would, I think, legitimately say, within certain definition of feminism, yes. I mean, she's taken on roles that that have traditionally been kept from women and so forth. And when I hear these kinds of arguments, I'm just not altogether sure that they're the most productive way to address a situation like this. It's dangerous, but throw it out.
I think they're super productive, and the reason is that I think that people, women, and everybody really needs to talk about what would make feminism better and what would make it more relevant to the vast majority of women, and the term faux feminism in the title of my book is a bit of hyperbole. Of course she is a feminist. I mean, feminism is a pretty low bar. I mean, like Beyonce is a feminist. It's like, it doesn't take a lot to be a feminist. But it does take a lot of thinking to think about how to move beyond a feminist politics that only serves elite women, and that is the kind of feminist politics that Hillary represents, and I think it is extremely productive to talk about that and to talk about what a more broad-based, whether you want to call it socialist or mass or popular or just anything else but the bourgeois feminism of Hillary Clinton. Do you want to?
Yeah. At the end of my book, or somewhere, I say, taking on the feminist argument. I started reading feminism when I was in high school. I mean, it's really something I've taken seriously for a long time. But the kind of feminism I've studied and admired has been joined to a critique of the structure of power. The kind of feminism Hillary stands for is just putting women in the places now currently occupied by men, but not really changing much else. If we just distribute the jobs equally by gender, then somehow we'll achieve greater justice. And I suppose in some sense that's true, but it's a very weak ambition to have. I think feminism, for example, has long been connected to a critique of war. Hillary loves war. It's very much the feminism of Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In. You know, this is, if we just get more women in boardrooms, we'll be a better society. No, we won't actually.
You had mentioned earlier, you gave the example of, I think you were talking about the AFT, Randy Weingarten. When that happened, because it was all done in secret, when she came out very early saying that the AFT endorses Hillary, there was absolute outrage within the union. Many of them, and not just rank and file members, but local leaders or statewide leaders were very, very opposed to that and called it as being dishonest. And of course nothing happened. But there is this very huge disconnect between the union leadership in most unions and the rank and file. And many of the large unions have given millions and millions and millions of dollars to the Democrats and have gotten nothing in return. And the AFL-CIO constantly gives millions of dues money, and they don't get anything. In fact, if anything, things have severely worsened, continue to worsen. And as far as Hillary is concerned, it was her husband who, through NAFTA, destroyed multi-millions of decent working class jobs. So I don't understand, well, I do, I have some understanding of it, but that this will probably happen again. I know CWA has endorsed Bernie Sanders, but I anticipate that the very large unions, again, will endorse her, give huge amounts of money, and we'll get nothing for it. So maybe you can speak to that.
Randy Weingarten is very accessible on Twitter, of all things. So she almost always responds when I tweet at her. And I did, after that endorsement came down, I said, do you know about Hillary's history with the Arkansas teachers and the competency testing and all that, making the teachers union the enemy? And she said, no, we had a meeting with Hillary, and she listens, and she understands. Hillary is really good at listening or pretending to listen. But when it comes to policy, she's not going to be there. I have another point to make, but now it slips my mind. So, do you have anything?
Oh, just I have been. I mean, the pattern you describe is absolutely the way things are. But I have been particularly struck by the teachers' unions falling in with Hillary, given this history. I mean, and it's not very hard to find. Carl Bernstein wrote about it in his book about Hillary, and Doug wrote about it in his book. We've got a chapter by Megan Erickson in our book as well, and I do think I do think that if some of this history were a bit more well known, some of the members would probably be even angrier about these decisions. And that might be true for other aspects of her labor record as well. You know, that, I mean, it may be that people, that the membership doesn't really know all of this stuff and how bad it is. But on the other hand, I think it also just does speak to the gap we're describing between the members and the elites in unions and everywhere else.
I had a recovery of memory. But we were at a meeting, like a year or two ago, at the AFT in New York City, or UFT in New York City, where Michael Mulgrew, the president of the New York City Teachers Union, was with Karen Lewis of the Chicago Teachers Union. And at one point, Mulgrew said, "We need a better litigation strategy." And moments later or earlier, Lewis said, "We need a social movement unionism." Yeah. So I think that's the contrast. We need a better litigation strategy versus an actual social movement. And that the Mulgrew thinking, I think, is identical with the Weingarten thinking. They're already in this building full of portraits of Albert Shanker.
Yeah.
It's just really unbearable.
And they totally stood there and acted like they were saying the same thing. And it was really clear that those were two entirely different visions. It was very interesting.
I've met her. She's an incredible woman and brilliant. And unfortunately, she was unable to run for mayor of Chicago.
In the hat, right? You had your hand up? Yeah.
I was just really struck by you talking about how the Republicans were willing to lose short-term to win long-term. And I losing would
do the same, but maybe it's worth a try. I don't know. I believe very much in the presidency is a bourgeois institution. As the Workers' Vanguard likes to say, the president is the chief executive of the world bourgeoisie. They're going to fight for that position pretty hard. I think the left should concentrate on organizing around issues like single payer and around organizing locally to create a base. And I think the local campaigns need to be networked nationally. I don't believe in all this independent localism. That's a mistake. That's the way the Social Democrats organized in Sweden. They started very low and moved up, and then became the dominant party in Sweden. And then organizing around issues. There's so much mystification when you get to high-level political campaigns, and the brand of the party and the candidates. People get very confused. They don't know what A large portion of Bush voters thought he supported the Kyoto Protocol and single payer. So people don't know what they're voting for a lot of the time. But if you bring it down to issues, people really understand that. Raise the minimum wage. Bring about single payer, employment protections. We haven't really talked about the climate crisis, but that's the biggest problem facing humanity right now. Organizing around that. These sorts of things are really, really important. And focusing on these elections, presidential elections every 4 years, are just really, except for Sanders. This is really a great opening. But generally, the amount of attention that people devote to this quadrennial ritual is, they'd be better spend the energy somewhere else.
You had a hand, right? Yeah, please.
I have a quick question. If one of the Republican candidates were to become president, which one do you think would do the least amount of damage?
This is the kind of question our son Ivan asks all the time. If you had to pick one of the Republicans, which one would you pick? And we haven't really gotten any better at answering this, despite the practice.
You say Kasich.
I guess I always say, but I hate him. I actually hate him more because he's been effective at some of his horrible right-wing anti-union governance. But he certainly looks better on stage, and when you listen to him, he sounds more reasonable. But no, I can't even imagine. They're just all so horrible.
Trump is an interesting character. The xenophobia is revolting. You could imagine him pogroms coming out of his rhetoric. But on the other hand, he'd blow up the Republican Party, which in the long term could be a good thing. But no, it's a very high risk strategy. I will say that because he's just the xenophobia is so revolting, and the forces that he's unleashed with that xenophobia it's terrifying, no question about it. But Bruce Bartlett, the Republican renegade, wants to see the destruction of the Republican Party, thinks that Trump should get the nomination and become president because it would destroy the Republicans forever, and that would be a good thing. He's not a Mexican, and neither am I. We're not Muslims either. So, the consequences could be very, very, very high for that development. But it sure would blow things up.
In the brown sweater here.
As well known as Clinton's difficulties with the way he manages his sex life was known before he was elected, when he went on Barbara Walters and talked about the gravity of the presidency and sincerely said this is behind him, I believe she believed him as well as I did and many other people. And so when that happened with Monica Lewinsky, I think she was completely blindsided. My son said to me last night, she's being hurt again for her husband's BS. And I'm thinking about it, I didn't know what to say. I realize I'm sitting here tonight. What bothers me about Hillary in that regard is not that she was blindsided, is that she won't today clearly condemn and say how awful his behavior was toward a disturbed young girl and an intern. Ridiculous. And so she wants to ignore it, that's fine. But she can't ask us all to ignore it and pretend everything is all right. It wasn't all right then. It's not all right now. He's not somebody that inspires me to do anything except walk the other way.
The last part of what you said, I absolutely agree with. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't. I don't think I feel as strongly as you do about the Monica Lewinsky situation. You're right, she was very young, but she also was an adult, and I don't feel that situation is my business, really, even as a citizen and voter. But I do feel concerned about the other allegations against Bill Clinton of harassment and especially of rape against Juanita Broderick is 72 years old. This happened many decades ago. She's still telling exactly the same story. She's very credible, the allegations are disturbing, and the charges that Hillary was involved in covering it up, and that she was engaged in trying to destroy the reputations of other women who had charges against Bill. I think that's disturbing. As far as just like adultery and cheating and lying, I really do feel like that's just private grown-up stuff that I'm not too concerned about. But there is a larger, more disturbing context of violence in some of these allegations.
Gabriel, and then I'll get you next.
I wanted to sort of follow up on this question here. It seems like the closest parallel to Bernie's campaign now is the 2008 campaign that also generated a fair amount of excitement. I think this one's probably more exciting and more substantive in a lot of ways in raising socialism as an issue and providing an opening, as you said, Doug. But I'm worried about what happened after Nader's campaign, that it just seemed to fizzle away. And so the question really is, assuming Hillary wins or Trump wins or Bernie doesn't win, what sense do you have of what could happen that would continue mobilization, having a political revolution? I mean, even if Bernie wins, he really hasn't said a whole lot or done a whole lot, in my view, to really say what a political revolution is. He has some sense of what it would mean, but it's not clear he's doing that. But really, the question is about if he loses, which is a more likely scenario, unfortunately, how do we sustain that momentum, preventing the Nader phenomena from repeating itself?
Yeah, I think that, whatever happens with Bernie, whether he wins the nomination, whether he wins the presidency, or whether he loses either, I agree with you. I think that the big question is how to build on that, and I think that's the serious question that we should be discussing. I mean, I think that the organization that Bernie has built, the campaign, all of these people have been really engaged and mobilized by this campaign, and many more have at least come out to see him, been excited by the ideas, and I think that I think it would be really great to see that infrastructure built upon, not just the excitement and the moment be seized upon, but how could that actual like can these people keep working on these issues beyond the campaign? Can people start running campaigns for their city council? And can people start trying to take over local politics? We're talking about these same these same kinds of policies, these same kinds of ideas, and I would think it certainly seems like there's a lot of momentum right now, and the Sanders campaign is a better campaign than the Nader campaign because he is running on better ideas and he's more of a real politician. So there's that. But I think that it's I think that it's also perhaps a better political moment to build on.
Yeah, a lot depends upon what he does. If he loses the nomination, there will be excruciating moments from June through November where perhaps he will be urging his supporters to vote for Hillary. And what do you do then? Will he be half-hearted about it or full-hearted about it? We don't know. Also, he's developed a huge list of names and emails. There are lots of local organizations developing. Will he work to keep those going? What will he do with all those contacts he's got? Millions of, now over 1 million contributors. What will he do with that information? He's certainly got the nucleus of a really serious long-term organization there if the people follow through on it, but will they? I never bought the argument that some people made that he was a sheepdog for the Democrats, that he was like trying to bind people to Hillary or draw them to who otherwise were reluctant. I don't believe that for a minute. I think he's really, really sincere about what he believes in. One of the reasons for success, we're a society drowning in bullshit, and he is just a no bullshit guy. And that's one of the beautiful things about him. When he talks, he's really saying something he actually believes in, which is such an unusual thing in American life. But then what happens after the nomination and then going forward after that? Nader, of course, disappeared. Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that some people have told me that Ralph just doesn't believe in organizations. They think they're corrupt in some ways, that organizations always develop their own self-interest and become corrupt and ossified, and therefore he didn't. He was openly contemptuous of the Green Party on numerous occasions. He's just not the kind of guy to organize a political movement for the long term. Bernie looks like he could be that kind of guy. Will he do it? He's no youth either, so how long is he going to be around for? But what happens with this nucleus of organization in the coming months? And we need to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't go up in smoke.
There's two more hands. Can we do two more and kind of wrap it up in the front and then over there on the right?
So what role do you see of young people playing in this election?
Well, there are a large base of Sanders support, but will they actually turn out to vote for him? That's the big question. Young people often don't vote. So will they? We'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That's we see a lot of polls showing that Sanders is doing really well, and of course I want to believe them, but I do worry about the pattern of young people not showing up. But I think he certainly has in terms of something maybe more important than voters, he certainly has the youthful volunteer energy much more than Hillary Clinton has, which does not mean he is going to be president, but it's something to build on. Again, with the sort of the idea of building on movements. Clearly a lot of young people are really excited about him, to the extent that it sometimes gets dismissed. I feel like the Sanders movement sometimes gets dismissed in the media as being this idealistic young people thing, as if there's something wrong with that.
I do want to say a word for the young people today. I think there's a lot of promise there. There's just this generation, there's a lot going on there, and I'm really happy to see that. the Xers were not such an inspiring generation, but there's a lot to be said for this crew. And although most people think that people get more conservative with age, that's not really true. Most people retain the politics that they develop in their 20s for the rest of their lives. They may temper it slightly with time, but so I mean, this is I've seen descriptions as the most progressive cohort of most progressive generation in the history of polling, and not just on social issues, but also on economic issues. And I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing this explosion for Sanders. That this, there's a voice now in public life for the kinds of politics that younger people have been groping for, developing on their own, longing for see public expression of, and it may be around for a long time as this generation gets older and moves into positions of greater influence. That may be a very good thing for our politics over the longer term. So that part of it is a very hopeful development.
That was one of Marx's big modes of production, the history of polling. Right? That was after Asiatic mode, the history of polling.
I think the young people, the appeal to Bernie Sanders, which is basically called war on this establishment, the whole system that we have going on. He's saying it's not working for them. They see that doesn't work for them. And I think that in the primary, if you're in a state where it's an open primary and young people can go out and vote because they didn't have to register in the Democratic primary, yeah, I think that he can win. But you're in a state like New York where you had to register a year ago or whatever to be in the Democratic side, it's all set up to keep people from voting. And that's a real problem. That needs to be changed. And nobody's really talking about just the whole election system that we have set up to keep people from voting. 2/3 of people aren't voting. And yet when you look at the polls about every issue after progressive issue, vast majorities of people are in favor of it. But it's not the electorate. So the people that with the hold on the current system, they vote, but the other people stay away, and the system's set up to keep them away. But my question is, even though there's some activists of the Black Lives Matter movement have come out in favor of Bernie Sanders, there's still this whole idea that African Americans are for Hillary Clinton. And I was doing a citizen action meeting last week, and we're talking about Bernie Sanders, and she's like, yeah, it's really good, but I'm really a Hillary woman. Sorry. They always say that. Sorry.
There's a lot to apologize for.
Inexplicable to me, and there's no one African American in the room here. What is that the Clintons have this hold on, or are perceived to have this hold on that community? I can lump them all together as a community.
Actually, Michelle Alexander, the author of New Jim Crow, put on her Facebook the other day exactly that question. Why do Black people support these people? And she gave a little bit of information about the history of the crime bill, and this is if she doesn't know, I don't know, but I would say, part of it is there is a really among leaders in Black communities, there's a pretty deep loyalty to the Democratic Party, probably because the Republicans are so racist. Which is, we could say, well, that's a lesser of evils reasoning, but it is a real thing. The Republicans are pretty racist, and it is hard to get past that. And I guess, I think with the Clintons, the fact that they've been around so long and have been so visible as Democrats, I think that they just do have, that there is this loyalty to them. They're not Republicans, and they're a recognizable name. And it may be as simple as that.
One explanation I've heard is that because for most Black people, the consequences of a Republican presidency would be so much more damaging than it would be for white people. They're more likely to take the safe choice, and that Hillary in this case, which I'm not convinced is correct, but the thinking is that she's a safe choice. I can understand that, but man, we've got to break out of this box somehow. I spend too much time on Twitter, I'll admit. But I posted that Michelle Alexander statement to Twitter the other day, and some guy from Media Matters, the David Brock Hillary Clinton front group, called me a white man who is patronizing black voters for not understanding their own interests.
Wow.
I said, I responded by saying, do you know who Michelle Alexander is? And he never answered me, so I don't think he knows who Michelle Alexander is. But I mean, the arrogance of the Clinton camp on these things is just breathtaking. They think it's just theirs for the taking. That's why the book is called, which I think there's still copies over there, called My Turn. And if they're all gone, you can buy it on the it's not on Amazon or in very many bookstores, but you can find it on orbooks.com and get your own copy.
I do think, I mean, it does look as though the Sanders campaign has been making more inroads into black communities, especially in the South, and I mean, and Michelle Alexander's question is a really good one. I mean, given the crime bill and welfare reform and these people's actual history, they are not a safe choice. I mean, unless you are a middle-class black person, in which case the impact of their policies is about the same, is not so bad. But it's but the impact on poor people of color is pretty serious. So I think that it was certainly the more that a candidate opposing her is able to make those arguments and to make the arguments that that a more progressive politics would be better, I'm sure that in the long run that would help.
Any closing thoughts, things you didn't get in that you wanted to get in, important bits that need to be said?
I thought there might be a Hillary supporter hiding here, no?
I know, I was surprised by that too.
They might not want to.
Great. Well then, please join me in a round of applause.
And thank you all. This is a great conversation. Thanks for your part of it.